Okay, so here we are with James Bonin and Greg Matthew Anderson, who are going to chat about Tom Stoppard and Artist Descending a Staircase. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me. It's great to be here with friends and comrades in arms and Stoppard freaks themselves. So thank you so much for being involved with this project too. So I just want to start with, one of those small questions, just thinking about what is it about Stoppard and his plays that draws you to them? There are so many elements, but I'm just going to start with that.
Well, are you asking me or Greg?
I'm talking to you, James Bonin.
Well, I think it really is, for me, it's always been the combination of this kind of rigorous intelligence, tremendous humor, and deep feeling. And there's a kind of discipline that it takes, even to read his plays. There's a discipline it takes in the audience to watch his plays. One of the things I've always admired about him is that he writes the play he wants to write. And if somebody doesn't quite understand everything, just as in Shakespeare, it's our job as co-artists with him to contextualize it enough with feeling and with nuance so that the audience never gets lost. But he's just fabulous at storytelling. And he has an unerring ear for the tempo of scenes and for the structure of scenes. I just think there's almost no one who writes like he does. And it's incredibly challenging. I mean, you were in that production of Hapgood we did all those years ago. I mean, when we finally got that first scene right in Hapgood, that was so complicated. I mean, the set designer and I finally had to do this drawing about 8 feet big and trace every single movement in that scene before we could figure out what the hell was going on.
I mean, we went through like a roll of butcher paper just trying to work it out. Right, exactly.
But yet when you get something like that right, you feel like you've won the Olympic gold medal or something. I mean, it's just. But I love that kind of challenge. I just think that, and you can never get his plays fully right. You're always a little disappointed when it opens, but yet you're feeling like, okay, we got 80% up the mountain. That's pretty darn good, or whatever. Sometimes you get 40% up the mountain, stuck in base camp because of bad weather. But it's just he's just, I don't know. I mean, ever since I first saw the first play of his in 1969, there was something about his rhythms that just spoke to me intrinsically.
And Greg, you were assisting directing on this one, but as an actor as well, so you've got it from two different perspectives. How do you feel like, what appeals to you so much? What draws you to this work?
Well, I just to echo everything James said, but and in hearing him speak, it seems to me what's so rewarding about it is a sense of unlocking, right? That there's like a terrific sense of accomplishment, whether it's unlocking sense or unlocking feeling. I mean, that there's a project at which we're engaged together. And I don't know, I feel like a perpetual student when I work on this stuff. I mean, like all plays, right? You should probably feel like you are learning something or that you're tackling some sort of either self-edifying or, but there's it is like being back in school. I mean, there's an energy to trying to figure this stuff out and then deliver it. And then I have to imagine it like a rock concert or a musician or something in front of a lot of people. When you do get those moments in front of an audience, when you've done the work and unlocked it and been these students in the room together and it works, I mean, there's a sense of kind of rock star status, like with that, like when you feel it working with an audience. And I think it's just an intoxicating thing, right? To make those things work. However, if it's 40% or otherwise, as James said, that it's an extraordinary accomplishment and what a great thing to be able to feel.
Absolutely. I mean, I would totally agree with both of you on that. But I think that's part of the also that sort of, for an actor, I would say that's the awe-inspiringness of going, I don't know if this is ever going to work and whether they're ever going to get it. And so there's a moment in the theater when the audience gets it and you go, oh, I can feel that. So something like this exercise working with, a radio play where and this was written as a radio play, it's a completely different relationship with the text. How did that change your thinking in dealing with this particular project?
Well, to me, it just it reiterates something essential about all of his work, which is it comes in through the ear. All of his plays are written for your ear. It's like he was writing plays in 1750 or something. And one thing about that Greg said, I mean, Stoppard is a perpetual student. I mean, that's what he does. He just falls in love with an idea and spends 3 years researching it, and then tries to get rid of all the stuff that isn't really essential, and make a story out of it. But for a play like this, it's almost like as a director, you're training yourself into sort of Stoppard hyperdrive, meaning that you don't have any visual help to tell the story, so you better get those every single connection in the ear of the audience immediately. And it's really challenging. God, I mean, it's exciting. It's really exciting. I've only done one other of his plays like this, but we did it, as a staged reading, so we cheated. But I really love this idea. I have no idea if people are going to understand it. But that's what I would say. I mean, it teaches you. I mean, if you really want to learn how Stoppard's music works, do a radio play, because there's no place to hide. If you don't understand something, it's like someone shooting a gun off during the it's just so obvious that you didn't get that. So let me give a quick story about what Greg was talking about when you get it right. I made an egregious mistake in persuading, over the course of 19 years, American Players Theater to do Arcadia outdoors, which was an insane idea, because outdoors in an 1,100 seat thrust theater, it just takes forever for the jokes to circulate. So the play takes too long. But here's something that was really fascinating. That famous moment when early in the 7th scene of the play, where a crucial piece of information is dropped into the audience's ear, which is that Thomasina burned to death on the night of her 17th birthday. Okay, so we're going along, first preview, and I feel like I've blocked it. I've put it all together. It's crystal clear. And I'm standing at the back of the house with my young assistant named Alex, and that moment happens, and I'm watching the audience, and I turned to Alex and I said, "Jesus, they did not hear it. They did not hear it. The ending will have no meaning at all." And that's what happened. And so we spent 2 hours the next day with actors, with the entire cast sitting in this big bowl of a theater, doing 14 lines.
The sonnet.
Every single moment, every single gesture, every single turn of the head, every single breath, every single pause, and every time someone, and people were stationed everywhere in the house, and anytime someone didn't hear something or get something, they put their hand up, and I'd say, "Stop, I gotta go back again." And we just had the discipline to do that. And the second preview, you knew they got it. But it's because, that's how careful you got to be. That's what he demands of you, is that kind of persistence in storytelling. And that is why I love him, because there's just nobody like that keeps challenging you, and you can't dodge any of it. It's just right there.
And precision. I mean, that's real precision. Like you're saying, that's how he structures it, but it's precision. And knowing the line you have to go between feeling and thought. Yeah.
You guys have both played his comedies. I mean, well, all of his plays are comedies, but he's the most reliable writer of jokes of any human being maybe with the possible exception of Oscar Wilde, who is a little excessive for my taste, even though I love him. But I mean, Stoppard has just an uncanny ear of how to make a joke work. so that as an actor, you can just relax because you know, oh man, I've got these 4 in a row that are going to slay them if I just say them. And that's what's so brilliant about it.
And if they're still listening.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They've got to be listening to get there. If they've given up already, you've lost them. Right. Because there's so much, whoa,
That's okay.
Greg, when you were listening as assistant director on this project, did you pick up something unusual? Did you find that there were things you were hearing in a different way, or was it an unusual experience being able now really to be the other ears for James in this project?
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, coming back to that, there was a really interesting improv show for a while that ran at I.O. here in Chicago, and I think it was called The Bat, and it was essentially an improvised scene done in darkness. So they were kind of creating a live radio play in the room, but you were hearing these improvisers, and your imagination was doing the rest of the work. And listening to this, and I was telling James, I would sit here and I would just close my eyes. I was trying to listen to this rehearsal in a way that was going to evoke like what it would be like to be listening to this on the radio or walking around the house or whatever people are going to be doing while they're listening to it. And I have to say, what was so great about it is that there's something so incredibly powerful about just the language, right? Which we all know and I think trust as actors, or hopefully trust as actors in space. But then, we have a lot of these other tools that we rely on and these designers and other things that we do to make story clear. And it was just thrilling. And I was giggling listening to the recording, like the rough recording that we got today. I was just laughing and giggling to myself, just knowing that this just works. This just works in the ear. And it's so affirming. It also is great as an actor to know that like, oh, wow, sometimes you don't have to do much of anything except deliver it clearly, and let that land or do whatever you've got to do to isolate the thought, as James was saying with that anecdote from Arcadia. As an aside too, I was just thinking about I was talking about rock and roll music. It also, what was so exciting listening to this project was, obviously after this year, we've all been looking for recorded art, but I was just so thrilled and so jazzed that, and quite frankly, moved listening to the thing today, that there was something that now exists that like we made, and it was made to exist in this form. And I was hearing your voices and thinking of, and knowing that this is in the world now, and thinking, God, this must be what it feels like to lay down music and to know that like, I made that and now people are going to listen to it and they can, and it will be there and it will be there for us. I don't know. We so rarely get a chance to do that. And what a thrilling project. To be around for that reason too, and for all of you.
We're so ephemeral normally.
Yeah, that's right.
It's something that actually has some concrete reality for at least a couple of weeks, and it's just going to feel like, oh, that's a unique feeling. Also, all of our mistakes are right there. Anyway,
from which we can always learn. We can always
exactly. Right. You always learn. I mean, you listen to this again, and you listen to yourself particularly, and you go, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." Or, "Oh, I wish I'd done just that little tiny bit there that I wish have polished more." And that's what every performance is like. But yeah. I mean, what about this play itself? Let's talk about Artist Descending a Staircase. I mean, the joys of it as a piece of art. I mean, it's a precursor of travesties. It's got bits of invention of love in there. There are all these plays that he's talked about. Real Thing, the idea of talking about art as an artist, which is always, I think, James, you and I agree that plays about theater, most of them we would prefer to, steer well clear of, aside from The Real Thing, which is love. But, most of them are, it's like navel gazing. So what about this makes it exciting for you to talk about art?
Well, I think it's useful to think about art in ways, because we live in a culture that doesn't prize it much and doesn't reward it much, and that's not good or bad. It's just the truth. And so I think there's lots of times when you're doing art, so to speak, which always makes me say those words out loud, but where you're thinking, well, this feels like it ought to be important, but will anybody hang on to it? And I think what Stoppard does with this play by kind of playing his own cards about the way he feels about modern art. And I think it would be different if he wrote this play now. I think he's refined his point of view a bit. But what he's really saying is, that art, because you think it's interesting, is not what art should be. Art is for the observer of the art. You put your heart and your mind and your talent, good or large or small, into making something that you give away. And the people who observe the art are either moved by it or treat it with disdain or indifference. But Sophie's voice in the play as a young woman who's dealing with these three guys, one of whom she's in love with. She tries to say to them, I don't think you guys should be quite so self-congratulatory about your art. And I think that all of us who are lucky enough to do art shouldn't spend much time thinking about how good we are. We should think about how the art might affect someone. When Remy Bumpa was just starting and we had no audiences, even when plays were pretty good, sometimes they weren't very good. I directed them all, so I can say that. But there was a young woman named Laura Lamson who was in a play called The Road to Mecca. We did it as a standalone, an idiot idea. And frequently during the week, there'd be 15 or 20 people in the audience. And she'd call me in tears. And I would say, well, if 3 people heard that story and got changed a little by it, you did your job. I mean, that's all you can do. You can just go out and be honest and be real, play the play. And so the stuff with art in this play will make you laugh a lot, but it will also sneak up on you and make you think, well, what do I think about all those guys? And how personal is art? And then he has this fabulous sucker punch in the play about love and about commitment and about loss and about grief. And this role of this young woman, and I mean, this play was written in 1972. 1972. He was 32 years old. I'm rough on the math, but the thing about him was always, he's an egghead. He doesn't do emotion. Read this play. My God. I mean, the play is full of emotion.
Well, he has that wonderful quote, which he said in an interview much later, like 1988, when he was converting this into a stage play. It basically said, contrary to decades of criticism, I deal with the emotions, and he was talking about this play, Yeah.
And the best thing, and this is a compliment to the two of you, is that what he figured out was that the actors taught him how to write emotion. Watching actors in rehearsal, where he would say, I don't care who says the line, I just want the information in the world. And, actors are going, okay. But watching these actors in rehearsal year after year, he realized, oh, no. They're doing the job I ought to be doing. I mean, I ought to give them a bigger emotional map that they can get lost in. And I think watching actors changed the way he wrote. Well, when he got older and he stopped having to show off every time. That's the other thing about art, frankly. The less you have to feel the need to show off, and the less you have to feel the need to say, look at me, I'm really smart. Then art gets more communal and it gets more public in the right way.
Right.
Because I don't give a darn what you think about me. what I care about is what you think about the ideas that I'm trying to convey. That's writing, and then sharing, and then making art in a communal way is about the most wonderful thing you can do if you're lucky enough to be able to do it. But
I find, and I'll go to Greg next, but I find that I feel uncomfortable when I'm saying I'm an artist. I feel much more comfortable when I say I'm a craftsman. That I'm looking at this. And if it happens to turn into art at some point, that's great. But I'm not turning it into art. I'm working at a craft, and trying to do that.
Yeah, and and the old joke is, you're not a good director until someone else says you're a good director.
Right.
What's amazing about what you just said, Nick and James, going back to the question about why we love stop art, and I would say then why I love and have loved working with you both, stop art or not, and about this play and what it says about art is that to take the art seriously is, I think, really important, as long as you don't take yourself seriously. And I think that's something you laid down so early, James, for this company, was that it was a very passionate and rigorous take on the work, but the room was never self-serious. You were never self-serious, and Nick, just, the discomfort of calling yourself an artist, that kind of self-important, this is why we love stop art too, is that it's in this play, it's in the other plays, is that you're looking at an enormous amount of serious work. But you can tell he's not precious about himself. He changes the work to suit a new production. He's, and the jokes are all in this particular piece, these love scenes are happening with outrageous physical comedy. These incredible expressions of affection and attention while art pieces are falling apart. That it's like Chekhov in some ways too, is that what's happening here and then what's letting us kind of relax out of a moment. It's delicious, and because it's not self-serious. So kudos to you both, and maybe that's why we all kind of love this stuff too.
Yeah, obviously Stop Art is a huge fan of and has done Seagull and Ivanov, and even way back Cherry Orchard. He appreciates that, and he's always said. He said for the Peter Hall Company, for the Seagull, he said he just thinks all of these things are way too serious. The way they treat Chekhov. That Chekhov himself was somebody who, even though he's dealing with serious human emotions, is taking them lightly. And James, you talk about that with Stop Art. There's a huge amount of depth of thought and emotion in these plays, but the lightness, that ability of the human spirit to sort of skim across the surface, doesn't say there isn't a depth, but to be able to have that double vision to a certain extent is the key to these plays in some ways.
Couldn't agree more, and it's essential. And that's what I was talking about before with trusting his ability as a writer, because he's created these scenes with such skill that if you live in them without wallowing in them, just to interact honestly, and we've all done that. We've all done this in rehearsal. It just slowly deepens. And your job as a director is to not be impatient and try to say, no, it's got to be this good right now. It doesn't matter when it's good. It just doesn't matter. What matters is the human connection and trusting that if I don't step on this joke, if I don't step on this line, there will be people in the audience that will remember this line for the next 20 years. Mm-hmm. If I step on this line, if I put 5% too much emotion into this line, then they'll remember me as being a not very good actor after 20 years.
I remember myself not being very good. I remember there's this one scene in Arcadia, which we did in 2004, and I just go, I just was horrible. And the rest of it I felt really proud of, and there was one scene I was just dreadful in. And I've just, I go, I will never get a chance to get that back. I know we talked to Barbara Vitello this week, and you talked to her on Monday, and I talked to her on Tuesday, and she's one of the most lovely things that I've ever had, which is that she named some of the great shows that she has seen in Chicago history, and The Real Thing that we did in 2006, she put up there in the first sort of top 8 shows she's ever seen in Chicago theater, which I just felt like, I mean, you know, all that sort of stuff. Because you go, how lovely. But she remembered this one, and it's not the big speeches. It wasn't those moments. It wasn't the cricket bat speech. It wasn't that stuff. It was the line about the undealt cards that just destroyed her, which is one of the great lines. And I feel is a constant in Stoppard that there is these little moments of, there's a line in Artist Descending, which is that great line about, you know, and I knew in that moment that I would never sort of feel complete for the rest of my life because I didn't have the relationship with this woman that I wanted to have in that moment, and it would never feel complete. And it's just a simple line, but it's just gorgeously heartbreaking. So those sort of secrets of humanity.
Because it's universal.
Yeah.
Because most people at the end of their lives can look back at 3 or 4 moments and realize, oh my God, if she'd said yes, or if I'd said yes, or if I hadn't, you know, said no to that job, or, you know, who knows what might have happened in life. And I think that's one of the great beauties of this play too, is that it moves back and forth in time. And so it's constantly, you know, time, the elasticity of time and the elasticity of memory is always at play. So, you know, it's like watching a Pinter play in that respect, you know, in the sort of ways that your brain jumps something up and then it recedes and then it comes up again, you know, and it's really, for a young man to write a play that astute about old age and what people live with is really quite remarkable.
This was the first of those. I mean, we've all worked on Arcadia at some point, and Greg, you've done it at least twice. Have you done it more than twice?
No, just twice.
Twice, okay. You know,
Can't wait till the next
just
one.
twice.
No, I know, but I'm already like, when's the next one coming out?
You're
Can I
right,
get in that one?
exactly.
Can I play some other character, because that's a play I could do forever.
Oh yeah, and there's so many, particularly, you know, we're lucky to be male in that position, but you know, there are so many roles in that. You don't go, I want to graduate to that guy. I want to play Jellaby by the end of this. I want to play that butler who comes in for 2 scenes, you know. But the idea of, and this seems to be common throughout that, and I sort of feel like this will, before we turn it over to a Q&A session, and we'll try and do some of that, but, you know, but in terms of this talk, it's such a common theme for him. I mean, this was kind of the first one, but, you know, after, and you get this sort of double vision of the older and the younger. You get it in Travesties with Carr looking back completely on a place and the tricks of memory. And then you get, you know, and the difference between memory and imagination that makes us look at our younger selves. And then you've got all the way to Invention of Love, which is all about that. Arcadia obviously is the double periods. Even Leopoldstadt, really, because it's taking you, his latest play, which is taking you through those periods in a family's life. And they're constantly looking back in the same play at 10 years, 20 years before. The way that is how humanity works, the perspective on yourself. And I think, you know, this play sees that you're 2 people. You know, Invention of Love is the same way. You're 2 people, always. A classicist and a romanticist. You know, you're a modernist, and you're still reflecting back on yourself as somebody who obeys the rules as a kid, or whatever it may be. You know, it seems to be a thing.
He sets up all these wonderful things in a play like Arcadia, and then you get the audience doing these odd things, like when Septimus burns Byron's letter, you feel the audience just gasp, because you know, Bernard's been blathering on, and as has Hannah, of, you know, we're going to find, you know, they wrote it down. Wherever it is, they've written it down, and all we have to do is find it. And then it goes up in smoke. And you realize whatever was in that letter is lost forever.
Like Thomasina.
Exactly.
You know, yeah.
And, you know, and one other quick anecdote about the way actors can change things. When I was working on Arcadia for the second time, it was an honor to do it both times. I was very, very proud of our production. And if the APT production had been indoors, I'd be prouder of it. You know, it just drove me mad. I wanted to kill myself, but because it just took so long for the jokes to get there. But All right. As you know, Greg, because you played the part, the role of Gus and Augustus, the dual role, Gus doesn't speak in the contemporary play. And Steve Haggard, who played our King Louis for us many years ago, and with first time Greg acted for us in Power, was playing Valentine, Gus's older brother. And Steve was just, kind of ignoring Gus because Gus didn't speak. There wasn't much interaction with him. And one day, close to to previews, I just walked up to Steve and very quietly said, Steve, you have a brother who has chosen not to speak for 6 years. And Steve looked at me and we both started to cry. And from that moment, he just started doing things to take care of Gus. Mm-hmm. He would just touch him or he'd be near him. And that's all you had to say, because Stoppard had built the architecture was there, but you have to notice it.
Yeah.
You have to notice as much as you can notice. And so, our jobs doing these plays, before you start rehearsal, is to just read them over and over and over and over again and think about them, think hard about them. So both as actor and as director or as designer, so that, what are the essential things and what are all the accidental things that can happen that can tell a story, so that every single gesture on that stage is part of the music.
Well, the things that I discovered in Travesties when we did it in 2015, which, I'd been working that play in my mind for 30 years. So, since I did it at university, and just going, why have these productions failed to look at this? Why have they missed it? Why is all this questioning about, why is Lenin in the play? All the critics, why is Lenin in the play? And you go, did you look at the coda? There's a reason why there's this stupid little coda at the end, which explains everything if you pay attention. And you go, otherwise he wouldn't have written it. It's not necessary unless you know why it's there. And just going, if you look at that, that's why it's there. And why would you miss it? It's so intricately put together. I mean, it's just, there's nothing spare. That, as you say, that information is there because it pays off somewhere. This wonderful way of like completing a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, if the audience and the play can do it at the same time, and you put that last piece together at the end of the show and just go dink. And I think Artist is the same way, it's that sort of and button, and you just go, oh, boom, light bulbs. I now need to see this play again, and the hope to get people back in the theater is just one of the great inspirations I find from Stoppard. It's like, these are the types of plays that people want to watch 3 or 4 times, because they're going to gain that thing. They're going to go, now I know what the puzzle is. I'm going to see how it's put together. Now I'm going to see, there's just more and more layers to it. It's just a delight. It's a parfait. Every layer is good.
And let's hope no one takes Greg's advice and is vacuuming while they're listening.
As long as they have headphones on, I don't care. As long as they
sometimes that's the best way to listen to something, is you're doing something else, and so you're like, it's a complete focus. Anyway, James, that Zadie Smith book you turned me on to, the one she wrote kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, Intimations.
Yeah.
Well, she talked about it. She talks about art. She's, great art is a going through, right? It's like you go through it, and I don't know if it was in the same sentence or not, but she also talked about its ability to shape time and to shape time into something else. And I remember reading that and thinking, that's this work. It's these plays where it's not, there's just a literal time that's shaped, but that he turns time over great expanses into these tight narratives. And then we experience great periods of time and great weight of things passing in time, whether it's a life or a love or or generations, family, Coast of Utopia, huge. That he's a great shaper of time into something else. And maybe that's also what's so deeply rewarding about not just working on it, but but being in the room for it, or being in the earbuds or whatever you're gonna listen to this, is that it is a going through, and that time is being shaped into something other than time, and terribly powerful, you know,
I
terribly.
love that. I think that's great. I mean, I always, you know, when I'm teaching one of our play reading classes, and I always start with what is the playwright doing with time? And I think every playwright looks at that. But you're right. He has this remarkable ability to pull in ages together rather than feeling I'm just stretching it or I'm compacting it or whatever it is. He's balancing different centuries against each other in some ways. Yeah. Yeah. Which is a gorgeous thing. Thank you so much, you two. It's always a joy to chat about this stuff. We're going to turn this over into a live Q&A session now. So I'm going to sort of wound this up. But thank you so much for working on this project. It's been a delight, as always, working with you both. And also working with Stoppard, Sir Tom, you know, who gives us so much and who we will never get tired of. It's kind of, you know, it's like, yeah, when can we do this again? So
It was great. Thanks for bringing me into it. And yeah, I just had a wonderful time. And you know,
I feel like, you know, this is our relationship. I mean, you know, working with Greg on Travesties, which was one of my great highs as a director, and working with you as an actor on Real Thing, and you know, was one of my great highs as an actor. I feel like these plays give us so much, and they are the markers in our journey through our theatrical world. And you know, it's kind of, we're in Stoppard time. So
great.
thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll work out how to stop.